Stop eating these 4 foods if you're trying to lower your blood sugar. I know what you're thinking, but these are healthy foods. That's exactly the problem. Every single person struggling with blood sugar right now is being sabotaged. Not by junk food, not by skipping the gym, but by foods the nutrition industry has spent decades calling good for you. Fruit juice, dried fruit, flavored yogurt, granola. 4 foods sitting in your kitchen right now, probably in your breakfast, doing to your blood sugar exactly what a candy bar does. In some cases, worse. I just went deep into the clinical research on this, and what I found is going to change the way you look at your morning meal permanently. Because the real reason these foods spike your glucose isn't the sugar on the label. It goes much deeper than that. And once you understand what these foods do inside your body within 15 minutes of eating them, you will never look at that glass of orange juice the same way again. Here's what's actually happening inside your body. Pay close attention, because this is the part nobody talks about. When you eat carbohydrates, your digestive system breaks them down into glucose. That glucose enters your bloodstream. Your pancreas detects the rise and releases insulin, a hormone whose entire job is to shuttle that glucose into your cells for energy. That's normal. That's healthy. That's the system working exactly as designed. The problem is speed. When glucose enters slowly the way it does with whole, fiber-rich food, your pancreas releases insulin in a calm, controlled wave. Blood sugar rises gently, come back down. You feel steady, you feel full. But when glucose floods in all at once, your pancreas panics. It fires a massive insulin surge. Blood sugar spikes hard, then crashes. And that crash is what sends you back to the kitchen, an hour later, hungry, reaching for more. Here's where it gets serious. When this happens repeatedly, meal after meal, day after day, your cells start going deaf to insulin's signal. They've been bombarded so many times they stop responding. That's insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is not just a blood sugar problem. It is the engine driving weight gain, fatigue, brain fog, inflammation, and eventually type 2 diabetes. So the real question isn't how much sugar is in these foods. It's how fast that sugar hits your blood. And that comes down to one thing most nutrition labels completely hide from you. Not calories, not fat, not even total carbohydrates. It's the structure of the food. Specifically, whether the fiber matrix is intact, or whether it has been removed, concentrated, or processed away. Fiber is not just a digestive aid. Fiber is your body's natural glucose governor. It slows sugar absorption. It creates viscosity in your stomach. It buys your pancreas time to respond properly. It is the difference between a gentle tide and a tidal wave. Every single one of these 4 foods has had that protection deliberately stripped away by juicing, dehydrating, sweetening, or processing. That's the mechanism. But underneath that mechanism is a root cause that explains why losing fiber triggers a hormonal cascade far beyond a simple blood sugar spike. That's where it gets really interesting. Let's start with fruit juice, because this one surprises people the most. When you eat a whole orange, your teeth break through the skin. You chew through the flesh, but the plant cells and the actual cellular walls of that fruit are only partially disrupted. Your stomach acid and digestive enzymes finish the job slowly. As the food moves through your small intestine, glucose and fructose release gradually. Blood sugar rises gently. Your pancreas responds calmly. Now take that same orange and juice it. You just removed every piece of structural fiber, the cellulose, the lignin, the physical architecture of the fruit. What's left is liquid sugar. And when liquid sugar hits your digestive system, there is no cell wall to break down, no fiber creating viscosity, no barrier slowing absorption. Glucose from fruit juice can register on a continuous glucose monitor within 15 to 30 minutes of drinking it. That is not food. That is a glucose delivery system. And here is where it gets worse. Fruit juice is loaded with fructose. Unlike glucose, which your muscles, your brain, and virtually every cell can burn for energy, fructose is metabolized almost exclusively in the liver. When you eat whole fruit, fiber slows fructose delivery so much that your liver handles it without stress. But when you drink juice, a massive fructose load hits your liver all at once. it gets overwhelming. The overflow converts directly into fat in a process called de novo lipogenesis. That fat accumulates in the liver, raises triglycerides, worsens insulin resistance, increases cardiovascular risk. This is not a theory. A prospective cohort study of over 7,600 participants found that eating whole fruit significantly reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes. Fruit juice? No such protection. And it may actually increase risk. The fiber isn't just missing. Its absence triggers an entirely different metabolic event inside your body. And fruit juice is only the first food on this list. Because dried fruit does something even more deceptive to your blood sugar using a mechanism so simple, so invisible, that almost nobody catches it until the damage is already done. Dried fruit. This one catches people off guard. It still feels like whole food. It came from a fruit. It still has fiber. It hasn't been juiced or powdered or chemically altered. So what's the problem? The problem is water. When you dehydrate a fruit, you remove 75 to 90% of its volume, but every single gram of sugar stays behind. What you're left with is an extreme sugar concentration packed into a portion so small your brain never gets the signal to stop eating. Here's the number that should stop you cold. 1 cup of fresh grapes is 15 to 20 grams of sugar. 1 cup of raisins, over 100 grams of sugar. Same fruit, same sugar. Completely different metabolic event. Here's why. Your stomach responds to volume as its primary fullness signal. Its stretch receptors tell your brain to stop eating based on how much physical space the food occupies. Dried fruit occupies almost none, so by the time your stomach signals fullness, your bloodstream is already flooded with a concentration of glucose and fructose that demands a massive insulin response. You feel satisfied. Your blood sugar is already spiking. Your pancreas is already overwhelmed. And it doesn't stop there. Walk down any health food aisle. Most commercial dried fruits are coated in added sugar, fruit juice concentrate, or honey. Others are treated with refined seed oils for that glossy appearance. You are not looking at healthy food. You are looking at a concentrated sugar bomb dressed in natural packaging. And the label is designed to make sure you never notice the difference. Now, pairing dried fruit with protein and fat does help. Clinical dietitians recommend treating it as a condiment. A few raisins in a handful of walnuts, a dried apricot alongside a piece of cheese. The fat and protein slow gastric emptying and buffer the glucose release. That strategy works. But here is what nobody says out loud. Most people are not eating 12 raisins. They are eating handfuls. And the moment portion discipline breaks, which it almost always does, because of that volume satiety mismatch, the buffer disappears entirely. You have simply added calories on top of a glucose spike. That is the compounding factor. It is not just that dried fruit is high in sugar. It is that the food itself is physically engineered by the dehydration process to defeat your body's fullness signals before you ever realize what's happened. Small size, concentrated sweetness, satisfying chew. Every sensory cue tells you to keep eating. Your blood sugar is paying the price. Fruit juice removes the fiber. Dried fruit removes the water. Different mechanisms. Same destination for a glucose surge. Your pancreas was never designed to handle on repeat, but the next two foods are doing something far more sophisticated. They are hiding behind ingredients that are genuinely good for you and Sechin using them as cover for the damage underneath. Flavored yogurt and granola. These two are the most dangerous foods on this list. Not because they're the worst offenders, chemically, but because they carry the strongest health halo of all four, and they use genuinely good science as the disguise. Start with yogurt. Yogurt is legitimately good for you. The live cultures, lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, support your gut microbiome. And your gut microbiome is not just a digestive detail. Research now recognizes it as a critical regulator of systemic inflammation and insulin sensitivity. A healthy microbiome strengthens your intestinal barrier. It reduces the leakage of inflammatory compounds into your bloodstream compounds that directly drive insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. That is real science, legitimate, peer-reviewed. Here is what the food industry did with it. When the low-fat movement took over nutrition, Manufacturers stripped the fat from yogurt. The texture went watery. The flavor disappeared, so they replaced the fat with sugar. Cane sugar, high fructose corn syrup, fruit preserves. A standard 150-gram serving of fruit-flavored low-fat yogurt contains 20 to 25 grams of sugar. 15 of those grams are pure added-free sugar. And here is what that actually means inside your body. Fat is not just about flavor. Fat triggers cholecystokinin, a hormone that slows gastric emptying and signals fullness. Remove the fat, flood it with sugar, and you have created a product your body absorbs almost as fast as a sweetened beverage. The probiotics are still there, but they are now swimming in a high-sugar medium that actively promotes gut dysbiosis, shifting your microbiome toward pathogenic bacteria that worsen the very insulin resistance the probiotics were supposed to fix. You came for the medicine. The sugar canceled it out. Granola runs the same play. Oats, nuts, seeds. Genuinely nutritious ingredients in every one of them. But commercial granola binds those ingredients together with honey, maple syrup, brown sugar, or agave. The food industry stamps these natural. Your pancreas reads them as sugar. No distinction. No mercy. The oats themselves are the second problem. Most commercial granolas use rolled or instant oats, steamed, flattened, structurally compromised. The grain's protective hull is gone. Digestion is nearly instantaneous. And when you coat already processed oats in liquid sweetener and bake them until they caramelize, you have not made healthy food. You have made a cookie, deconstructed, repackaged, sold at a premium. A single cup of standard granola delivers 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrates. That is not breakfast. That is a metabolic emergency in rustic packaging. And most people pour a full cup without thinking twice, because the serving size printed on the bag is a quarter cup, and nobody eats a quarter cup of granola. But here is what none of this captures yet. Because what these 4 foods do to your blood sugar morning after morning is not just a breakfast problem. It is a whole body problem. And it starts far earlier than most people realize. I want to stop here for a moment, because this next part is important. I have sat across from patients in my clinic who were doing everything right, or so they thought, and delivering this news that the foods they were most proud of were the ones destroying their progress is one of the hardest conversations a physician can have. One patient comes to mind, mid-40s, motivated, disciplined. She had completely overhauled her diet after a prediabetes diagnosis. Cut out soda, cut out candy, cut out fast food. She rebuilt her entire morning around what she believed were clean, intentional choices. Orange juice, granola, fruit-flavored yogurt. She was proud of that breakfast. She told me, "Doctor, I am finally eating clean." Her fasting glucose had gone up, not down, up, despite doing everything she thought she was supposed to do. And when I walked through her morning meal with her, when I showed her what was happening inside her body, within 30 minutes of that first sip of juice, I watched something shift in her expression. It was not an embarrassment. It was a relief. Because for months she had been blaming herself, assuming the problem was discipline, assuming the problem was willpower, assuming she just was not trying hard enough. She was trying as hard as anyone I have ever treated. The problem was never her. The problem was the breakfast. That glucose spike from her morning meal was triggering a sharp insulin surge, followed by a crash that left her fatigued and ravenous by 10 in the morning. By lunch, her cravings were so intense that her afternoon choices unraveled everything she had built. It was not a character flaw driving that cycle. It was biology. Specifically, the biology of a blood sugar crash repeating itself every single day before she even got to work. And she is not unusual. I see this pattern constantly. People who have eliminated every obvious offender, the soda, the candy, the drive-through, but are still stuck, still watching numbers that refuse to move, still frustrated, still internalizing as a personal deficiency, when it is nothing of the sort. Here is what I need you to hear. This is not a willpower problem. It is a food design problem. These products were engineered to taste good, carry a health claim, and sell at volume. What they do to your metabolisms was never part of the calculation. But here is what I have also watched happen consistently, predictably, when patients make the specific swaps I am about to give you. Within 2 weeks, fasting glucose numbers begin to shift. The morning crashes quietly down. The food noise fades. Cravings that felt like weakness turn out to be blood sugar. And when the blood sugar stabilizes, they resolve almost on their own. That is not a miracle. That is just your biology finally working the way it was always designed to. The fix is simpler than you think. Let me show you exactly what it looks like. Here is what you actually do. And I want you to notice how simple this is, because the simpler the change, the more likely you are to sustain it for life. 4 swaps. Same breakfast occasion, completely different metabolic outcome. Swap 1. Put down the juice. Pick up the whole fruit. Not a smooth, not fruit-flavored anything. The actual whole fruit skin intact, fiber matrix intact, cellular structure intact. A whole orange, a handful of fresh berries, an apple with the skin on. The fiber that the juicing process discards is the single most critical element for flattening your postprandial glucose curve. You are not giving up fruit. You are taking back the part of the fruit your metabolism actually needs, the part that tells your pancreas to respond calmly instead of panic-firing insulin. 1 rule: eat it, don't drink it. Swap 2: stop treating dried fruit like a snack. Start treating it like a condiment. If you enjoy raisins or dried apricots, keep them, but measure them. A small amount added to a serving of raw walnuts or paired alongside a piece of cheese creates a nutritional buffer. The fat and protein slow gastric emptying and soften the glucose response. That buffer is real and it works. But it only works at the right portion. The moment dried fruit becomes a handful, and it almost always becomes a handful, the buffer is gone. You have simply added calories on top of a spike. 12 raisins, not 12 handfuls. Swap 3. Replace flavored yogurt with plain full-fat Greek yogurt. Full-fat, plain, Greek or Icelandic skyr specifically. These varieties are strained to remove excess whey, leaving a product with 15 to 20 grams of protein per serving, significantly lower lactose, and the dairy fat matrix fully intact. That fat triggers cholecystokinin, slows digestion, sustains satiety for hours. If plain yogurt feels too stark, add fresh berries and a small sprinkle of cinnamon. Research suggests cinnamon mimics insulin's effect at the cellular level. It is not a miracle spice, but it is a meaningful addition. You get the probiotics. You get the protein. You get the fat doing exactly what fat was designed to do. And you get none of the added sugar canceling all of it out. Swap 4. Ditch the granola. Choose steel-cut oats or a grain-free blend. Steel-cut oats retain their full structural integrity. The hull is intact, digestion is slow. The glucose response is dramatically flatter than anything rolled or instant. If you need the crunch and texture that granola delivers, a grain-free blend built on almonds, pumpkin seeds, chia, flax, and cinnamon gives you exactly that with a glycemic index less than half of standard honey granola. Same satisfaction, completely different metabolic signal. 4 swaps. That is the entire intervention. But there is one layer left, and it may be the most powerful tool on this entire list, because it does not require changing a single food on your plate. It only requires changing the order in which you eat them. Here is the final piece, and I saved it for last deliberately, because this one requires no new foods, no new supplements, and no changes to your grocery list. It only requires changing the order in which food enters your body. Clinical research has demonstrated that eating fiber and protein first, before any carbohydrate reaches your digestive system, can reduce your postprandial glucose spike by 30 to 50%. Same plate, same portions, same foods, just a different sequence, and your blood sugar response changes dramatically. Here is the mechanism. When you eat non-starchy vegetables or protein first, fiber increases the viscosity of your stomach contents immediately. That viscosity slows gastric emptying. Simultaneously, protein and fat trigger the release of cholecystokinin and GLP-1 hormones that further slow digestion and prime your pancreas to release insulin in a controlled, measured wave instead of a panic surge. By the time the carbohydrate arrives at your small intestine, the fiber and protein have already built a physical mesh that slows glucose diffusion to the intestinal wall. The spike never fully forms. Now apply that directly to everything we just covered. You have made the swap to whole fruit. Good. But if that fruit is the first thing hitting your digestive system, on an empty stomach, you are still sending a sugar load into a body that has been fasting all night, already primed by cortisol and growth hormone to release stored glucose from your liver. That is the dawn phenomenon. And it means your morning glucose baseline is already elevated before your first bite. The sequence fix is simple. Eat the Greek yogurt first. Let the protein and fat prime your system. Let cholecystokinin slow your gastric emptying. Then eat the fruit. That single reordering of the same foods and portions produces a dramatically flatter glucose curve than eating them in reverse. This is not a minor optimization. Meal sequencing is one of the most evidence-backed and most consistently ignored tools in metabolic nutrition. It cannot be bottled. It cannot be patented. It cannot be sold, which is exactly why you have probably never heard a food company mention it. Now look at what you have built across this video. You have eliminated 4 foods that were silently spiking your glucose every single morning. You understand the mechanism, not just the rule, but the biological reason behind it. You have 4 specific swaps you can execute, starting with your very next meal. And you have a sequencing strategy that amplifies every correct food choice you make going forward. Your fasting glucose numbers are going to start moving. The morning crashes are going to become less frequent. The food noise is going to get quieter. And as it gets quieter, your afternoon choices get easier. As your afternoon choices get easier, your evening numbers improve. As your evening numbers improve, you wake up tomorrow with a lower baseline than you had today. That is a compounding metabolic advantage, building on itself every single day. And if you want to know exactly how to structure your full day of eating, not just breakfast, but every meal to keep glucose stable from morning to night, I put together a complete breakdown of the meal sequencing protocol, the specific food combinations that create the strongest protective effects, and the one morning habit that research shows has the single greatest impact on your fasting glucose numbers. Watch that next. It starts exactly where this one ends.